Is everybody in? Is everybody in? The show is about to begin.
Hey, welcome to another episode of Concerts That Made Us. I'm your host Brian, and before we get into this week's episode, the answer to last week's trivia question was, of course, Gene Simmons. Gene taught at a public school on Manhattan's Upper West Side for 6 months. He quit when he realised the reason he wanted to be a teacher was because he got to stand in front of people and be noticed. But what he really wanted was to stand in front of people on stage as a musician. And now for this week's music trivia question. Which musician was offered the chance to write the lyrics of Purple Rain, but turned Prince down? And we've got another 5-star review. Rock on. This is great. From a guy who has been to over 500 concerts and published a music mag, it's great to hear others talk about their experiences. Rock on. This was left by Gmail 909-79779 on iTunes. So let's get on to this week's episode. My guest is the person behind rock band Vattica and TikTok star Alex Millar. We have a really great chat about how Alex got into the music industry, about the complicated history with the band Vattica, and of course, the TikTok series Self-Made is a Toxic Myth. This is an incredibly interesting episode. I know you're going to love it. So, without further ado, let's get on with the show.
Like a wolf to a fire, like a moth to a flame. You draw me inside you, spit me out again. It's hell and we know it burns so deep in our blood. Like a heart holds a secret, like a tongue tells a lie. I carry you with me, no matter how hard I try. It's hell and we know it burns us just like gasoline. Like gasoline.
Hey, Alex, you're very welcome to Concerts That Made Us.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Great. Glad to hear it. I've been looking forward to this one for a while. I feel like we're going to have a very interesting chat.
Me too. I mean, if it's anything like the pre-interview chat, that's fascinating.
It was. Unfortunately, that's not for the listeners' ears, though. So
Nope,
you're
it's
privileged.
top secret. It's classified.
Exactly. So we just heard your latest release, Gasoline. Would you like to tell us a bit about it?
Sure. So, Gasoline is a song about the potential of human desire, right? So you can have a desire for anything. I don't know. In America, we tend to associate the word desire with sex, and it can be for that, but it could also be for anything. You can have desire for fame, a desire for power, a desire for wealth, and so what it is that you desire really motivates your actions in life. And a desire is neither good nor bad. It just is. It's how you act on that desire and what you do with that energy that it's giving you. So what do you make your life about? That determines the moralistic quality. So the song is written from the perspective of, someone struggling with the fact that they have what a lot of spiritual teachers would call like a wrong action or wrong desire, and it feels like it's burning them up because they keep chasing it, but the more they chase it, the thirstier they get. They never get what they want, and that's the case with a lot of destructive desires. Like, for example, an extreme example of that is Jeff Bezos, who his lust for money has gone beyond even money, and now it's just about power, to the extent that he's willing to subjugate people and destroy the very earth that we live upon in pursuit of his own unquenchable thirst for, what is it really? I'm not a psychologist. What does it actually trace back to? But obviously it's like an obsession at this point. It's out of control, and it's fascinating because I don't think Jeff Bezos thinks of himself as a bad person, right? Like, no one is the villain in their own narrative, and yet people do villainous things because we're driven by these forces. So that's kind of what the song's about.
Yeah, that's a very good point, actually. It's almost like the richer he's got, he's turned into a classic Bond villain almost,
Yeah, well, he's literally Lex Luthor. Like, I remember I read this Superman comic as a kid, and Jimmy Olsen, Superman's friend or whatever, mentions this offhand fact that, and this comic was written in the 60s or something. So Lex Luthor made $100 a second because of all his corporations. So if he saw $100 bill lying on the street, it literally wouldn't be worth his time to bend over and pick it up. Except Bezos is that, except he makes $10,000 a second, or I don't know what the actual number is, but and still that's not enough, right? And there's so many things that he could solve with that amount of wealth and influence, and instead of that, he's flying, the guy that played Captain Kirk into almost space, and he's, the whole reason he's working on his rockets is to move all manufacturing jobs into space, whether that be by humans or robots. And his, I was reading in an interview with him, his ultimate goal is to sort of terraform the Earth into a paradise planet, but only for the elite, and then the rest of us will be up. I don't know if you've ever seen the show The Expanse, but that's literally the plot of The Expanse. Ironically, streaming on Amazon Prime right now.
I wonder where he got the idea from. So
yeah, he's like, this is great, perfect.
Oh, it's a crazy world we live in. I feel like, though, it's almost part of human nature to not be able to stop and always want more,
Yeah, whether you attribute that to human nature or the ego or whatever, you want more of what you want, and as long as you're thinking only about your short-term benefit, your long-term benefit, as instead of considering that you're a part of a whole, and how do your actions affect everything else around you? This, especially with this extreme version of capitalism that we all live under. Everybody has sort of this toxic individuality mindset, like we're all separate entities that operate in our own personal little vacuums, when in reality, it can be as simple as, let's say I said something really rude to you right now and that really ruffled you, right? And then you carry that energy into interactions with other people in your life long after this interview has ended, and then that upsets them, and so I've caused a ripple effect, right? And now that one thing and that one time might not be so bad, depending, but it's like all of us going through our lives affect everything around us all the time, from the minuscule ways to the grandiose. And it seems like the people that are in power don't think of that at all. They think of themselves, and then everything else is sort of like pieces on a chessboard for them.
Yeah. Well, when it comes to politics, I think it's becoming more and more obvious that nobody gets into politics to help people. It's all about monetary gain and power.
Yeah, or if they did originally, they get seduced by those things.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we better move on to you, or else we'll have to. It'll be politics that made us instead of concerts that made us.
Sure.
But I know on TikTok you summed up your career in 2 videos that were about maybe 2 minutes long. I'm hoping we could maybe stretch them out this evening now.
Sure.
So, can you tell me if you can remember your earliest musical memory?
Yes, my earliest musical memory is dancing to music with my father when I was like, I don't know, 3 or 4 or something. He must have been carrying me. My father is a musician and composer and conductor and teacher for 45 years or something. So I grew up in a musical family. So I've been playing music since I was 6. So that's my earliest one.
Jeez, you were hugely influenced from an early age, and I feel like there was probably no question that you weren't going to be a musician then, was there?
You'd have to ask my folks. I don't know. My mom's a therapist, so I guess I could have gone in that direction too. I definitely have like an intellectual bent, but and I'm fascinated by human beings' behavior, including my own. But music is the place where I don't have to think, like I just am. And I always feel silly when I say this because it's kind of, I don't want to sound too esoteric, but I go away when I play music, and just the music is there going through me. Not that I'm like some profound vessel or anything. That's just how it feels when I'm creating or when I'm performing music. And a lot of my artist friends, whatever their medium, musicians, dancers, painter, whatever, feel that way too. Like the process of channeling inspiration feels like you are just that thing at that time. And I think that's one of the reasons that I loved it from so early on, is it's a pure state of being beyond thought.
Yeah, that's actually fascinating. I've never heard it put like that now. It's it makes it seem almost pure, you know?
It feels that way to me. I'm talking specifically about the process of creation and performance. When you're in the process of production, like mixing, mastering, or recording, that's more nuts and bolts, it's fun, but it's not like a transcendent experience where if I'm performing on stage, I just am that music at that point, or like I'm not thinking at all. I'm just being. It's very present, and it's the only place in my life where I feel like that.
Yeah.
Like even right now, I'm remembering your question, right? I'm watching your reactions. I'm responding to them, and I'm thinking, slightly ahead of what I'm going to say. That's all a process that's happening, as opposed to just being,
Yeah. Jeez, if you could bottle that feeling now and sell it, you'd be the next Jeff Bezos.
They're trying, yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember a certain point when you looked at an artist and thought, that's what I want to do?
Absolutely. The first time I ever heard Green Day, I was like, well, it's two things. One, oh God, I would have been 12 or 13. And whenever it was Dookie came out in 94, like I wanted that record, but I couldn't have it because it had the explicit language label on it. So I had to get their records they had 2 EPs before that when they were on an indie label that didn't have it. So I like memorized those. And I realize now, had a huge crush on Billy Joe Armstrong, but I was like, I want to be him. I want to do what he does, like write like him, like everything he is, like I'm all about. That's my earliest memory of like this is what I want to do.
Jeez, that's not one I hear very often now. Green Day, obviously, they are a great band. I've seen them twice in concert myself now, but it doesn't come up too often as a huge inspiration.
I don't know. I take your word for it. It depends on, I guess, the demographic. You know, I was born in the '80s, so I'm their like target demographic. So if you're interviewing someone who's born in like 2000 or '98 or something, like they're probably not the same kind of influence.
True.
And the last time they were really politically relevant was like '04 through '08 or something like that. Like when they, you know, with their resurgence with American Idiot and 21st Century Breakdown. So, you know, for a lot of people, you know, it just depends when you were born. You know,
Yeah.
a lot of people born at the turn of the century, and so that's like, oh, you mean the music that came out when I was one? It's not going to be relevant to them.
Yeah, true, actually. True. It that tends to make you feel very old though as well,
It
doesn't
does. It does. We're born in the 1900s. Yes, those
Oh.
halcyon days of yore.
Oh God. What was your first steps then after that? Was it get a guitar, start learning? Was it automatically singing?
Well, I was born into a middle to upper. I guess to be fair, it's upper middle class family because they actually own their own house and they had a garage. You know those stories where there's they started a company just in their garage. Like, well, that's still not starting from nothing. That's a point of privilege because you had to have a garage, right? But in my parents' garage was a acoustic guitar, which I belonged to an uncle of mine, and I found and just started teaching myself how to play. And from there, like I knew that that was the instrument I wanted to focus on. I started on piano when I was 6, but that was the instrument I really fell in love with. And yeah, then I was gifted a electric guitar, and pretty quickly formed my first band when I was 14, and have been playing professionally ever since.
That's quite an accomplishment. Was it I know for me, when I was around 13, 14, every second person in school had a guitar, had a band. Was it similar for you?
uh, no, so I was homeschooled until I was, I guess, right at 14. Like I wanted to go to high school to be around people my own age, but so when I got to high school was a horrible time for me. But yeah, some people played the guitar, but I also grew up in a relatively small town. So I'm from the Bay Area, but when you think Bay Area, you think San Francisco or maybe Oakland.
Hmm.
But I grew up like 20 minutes, 30 minutes away from that, and so it not a lot of diversity in the town that I was from, and so there's a lot of the stereotypical, like there were the preppies, there were the jocks, like there were the punk kids, there were the nerds, like that kind of thing. So I the only place I found any kind of acceptance was with the punks and the anarchists and stuff, and so a lot of them were musicians too. But I wouldn't say that in my high school a lot of people had a band like from my high school, but there was a local scene, and there were a lot of like teenagers like me who had bands, and that was the scene. But I didn't necessarily go to high school with them, is all.
Yeah, yeah, I get you. I get you. It must have been kind of hard to transition into high school then after being homeschooled.
Oh yeah, it was terrible. I was incredibly naive. I had been used to hanging out with adults mostly before that. I mean, I had some like nerdy homeschool groups and stuff, but um, I wasn't prepared for the level of meanness and emotional manipulation, especially that high school kids can be. And at the same time, I had onset of or like it manifested in my life for the first time in a significant way, obsessive compulsive disorder, which I mean I have had all my life, but that was the first time I got really bad, and it wasn't like a buzzword then. It wasn't like a trendy
Yeah.
thing. No one knew what it was exactly, and so I thought that I was losing my mind, which wasn't fun. So that was a dark. In a lot of ways, that was a really dark time, and also it was I had a lot of really great musical experiences during that time too. So music was my like one salvation in that period.
Yeah, I was just about to say, was it music that got you through high school almost?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Music and performing music specifically, not just listening, but like being it, doing it, you know. I mean,
Mm.
I band practice 5 days a week. And I was in this community college program where the teacher organized every Sunday. There was like a 12-hour long, not 12-hour, I'm sorry. There were 12 slots. It was like a 6-hour jam thing at the local bar, which I thought was amazing because like I'm 14 and I'm in a bar and you have to be 21 to be in a bar in America. And so I was like, oh, this is where the action is. All right. And I just, that's where I played there like every week. So that's where I honed a lot of my early stage performance and stuff, was just getting the opportunity to play over and over and over again.
It must have been quite hard though, nerve-wracking almost, getting up on stage them first couple of times.
No, I don't mean this with any bravado, but the first and the last time I had stage fright was the first time I ever performed live, and then after that I was like, oh, I can do this. I feel really comfortable on stage when I'm singing and playing guitar. If I'm just singing, I feel more self-conscious. Like if I don't have a guitar on, I feel quite awkward.
Almost
And
naked.
yeah, and it took me a long time to learn how to talk in between songs. Like public speaking is actually scary for me. But if I'm singing and playing, not at all. So I didn't get good at being I never set out to be the front person of a band. That just sort of happened because I was one of the people that could sing. So they're like, I guess you're singing. Like, okay. But so I didn't really embrace trying to be a front man until like 2010 or 2012 or something. And really develop like being able to like command a show or an audience as opposed to just being a player, because it's not about like ego or like look at me. Like I just love performing, and I love playing music to people who might like what I make. That's all.
Yeah, I get you. It sounds almost, and I was thinking of what you said previously about how you feel on stage, and almost being like a vessel.
Yeah.
It's like when you got on stage, you only had the stage fright the first time. It's like you finally found your home, maybe. Could you put it like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I felt totally comfortable, especially that's a really interesting way of thinking of it, because especially since you have a set list when you're playing, so you know what's going to happen, even if the audience doesn't. And so it's there's an element of control in the immediacy and the spontaneity of performing, because at least you know in theory what the next song's going to be. Whereas we don't get that in life very much.
Yeah, true. And I'm fascinated to know, how do you approach your songwriting then?
From what aspect? You mean the original like idea or the production?
Is it a very personal process, or do you write from a character's point of view?
I guess it sort of depends at what point. I've done all those, so it depends what point in my life you're asking. I used to write collaboratively for my personal music. I mean, I still collaborate with people, but if it's going to be like a Vattica song, it used to be a total collaboration, and now it's just me. So I write and do everything myself. My experience for writing anything, though, in general, is that there's nothing, and then an idea pops into my head, like seemingly out of nothingness, and then I'm compelled to go like jot down or write down or record that idea. And sometimes that idea becomes a full song on the spot, and sometimes it goes into like my giant catalog of ideas, and I don't get to it for years or whatever, because I get as far as I can with it at any time. But my goal is always to write a full song. But so I don't feel like I invent them. It's like, here it is, what can you do with this idea? Like, okay, well, I'm going to do this, and I hear this melody for it, and then that melody makes me think of, like, this could be about this, okay, and then I sort of work on the lyrics and melody and chord progression, and then once that happens, I just plug it into song structure that I'm going to use.
Yeah, yeah. I have a bit of an impossible question now. I love throwing it out at musicians. It's a tough one. You might not have an answer, but
I'm ready.
How do you know when a song is complete that you can't add anything more to it?
So on the one hand, I guess it's really you have to let go, because a song is never complete. It can always be better. And if you had your whole life to work on one song, you could improve it forever. And whether that's from a writing perspective, a mixing perspective, a mastering perspective, a instrumentation perspective, like tweaking your lyrics, a vocal performance perspective, right? That's why you'll see artists even go back and re-record, whatever their iconic song was that made them, because they're a better performer now, and they think that, well, the song's got to be better now that I can do it this way. So you just sort of have to sign off. It helps when there's a release deadline. So because it's like, well, I have to have it, I have to be able to live with it at this point. There's always stuff. So in some ways they're never done. And in other ways you'll or at least I feel like I'll drive myself crazy if I try to like make the perfect song. And also if I achieved that, if I made what I consider to be the perfect song, like I'd be done then, right? Like I couldn't top it.
Actually.
It'd be perfect. So you're always sort of chasing a completeness that you can never really reach. So it's my experience with it is every time I write something new, that's the favorite song that I've ever written ever for that month or however long I'm working on it, and then and I get really happy with the mix and the final product, and then I'm done with it and I move on to the next thing. And oftentimes I don't listen to that. If that song was created last year, I probably won't be listening to it ever in another year, because I'll hear like, oh, I'm better at this now, or I should have mixed the snare drum this way, or I should have done this.
Yeah,
it's too distracting.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I was just thinking when you were speaking, when you said if you wrote the perfect song, I wonder how the likes of Lennon and McCartney would feel about their songs.
From what I understand, they like if you're talking about the stuff they wrote together, they often found it kind of silly, and they knew that it was pop. Not that there's anything wrong with pop, but they considered it like, I think Paul McCartney has a quote of him telling John Lennon, all right, now let's go ride a swimming pool. What they mean is we're going to make enough money for us all to have swimming pools,
Yeah.
I'm sure they had fun doing it, but I don't know. I would beware of an artist that thinks that they've written, or like buys into their own hype, or thinks that they've written the perfect thing, because I think that that's impossible. So that would mean they have so much ego that they consider themselves, they like buy into their own accolades, or like, yes, I'm a genius because I wrote this song. It's like, no. Did you write it? Was it written through you? Was it because of the combination of circumstances that came together at that time, and the people and the musicians and the play? You know what I mean? Like Queen's still writing music, but it's not Queen without Freddie Mercury.
Exactly.
Adam Lambert's a great performer, and and an amazing singer, and he's able to sing those songs and do a great job with them. But it's not the same as Freddie Mercury. So that the actual, if it was an algorithmic formula that equals Queen, like something's missing. They're a different thing now. Yeah. Just have the same band name.
Yeah. It's a good way to look at it, actually. Can we speak about Vattica then?
Yeah.
How did Vattica come about? I know it's a bit of a complicated history.
It is. I'll try to give you the short version. So me and my best friend at the time were playing in several bands together up in the Bay Area when that local scene sort of kind of died. And we set off towards Los Angeles in search of fame and fortune. And when we got here, we placed an ad for a bass player and auditioned a bunch of people. So he's a drummer, and I'm a guitarist, and I get around the piano too and sing. But so we were a 3-piece for a long time, and we formed what would become Vattica. So we did like the classic way. We played a bazillion shows, did some like tours, worked our way up through the Sunset Strip, playing with a bunch of other more popular bands, and eventually gained the attention of this indie label that offered us a record contract. I don't know if naive is the right word. Like we didn't have a lot of options. It was like there was that, and then there was one other label that offered us a deal that was worse, and then so it was like basically that or nothing. And we were so hungry at the time that we took it, even though there was a lot of provisions in that contract that were not great. But
Really?
yeah, but none of us are lawyers. Like I'm pretty good at reading contracts and understanding them, but I'm still not a lawyer, and so I wouldn't know what like alternatives to these certain clauses were. So what the indie label did was, oh yeah, here's your lawyer, he works for the label. Here's your management, they work for the label. Here's your booking agent. So, but we were like, I mean, all right, it's not the greatest contract, but then we're gonna do well, and we'll renegotiate our contract later. And in fact, that's what they said that we could do. And then they sort of just sat on us and didn't really do anything. And it turned out that the head of that label, I don't know what the exact psychological thing would be, but his main driving force was power over other people. So what he'd like to do is sign bands, give them a very small advance, and then just not do anything with them and have them all sort of audition for his favor to be put on a tour or to be able to record something or whatever. So the first thing they had us do was like take down all our music, take down our social media, like not post anything. And what they were doing is killing our buzz right away so that we wouldn't be able to do anything without them. Then that label got picked up by Sony. So suddenly our contract was renegotiated and we were signed to Sony, but still being managed all of our day-to-day stuff by that label. But what it gave us the opportunity to do was record a record. There was some money there finally. And we got to record this really great record with this wonderful fellow named Ben Gross, who is a producer and engineer in Los Angeles at the Mix Room, is his recording studio. And he's worked with everybody. Like when you go into his place, there's just like walls of like various level, gold and platinum records and stuff. And you're like, I know that one. I know that one. I know that one. But he's the sweetest guy. Like, he was pretty much done with producing at that point. He liked us, so he decided to produce us. He treated us just the same as I've seen him treat, quote unquote important people, because we were an unknown band. It was a wonderful, wonderful experience. Happened over the course of like 6 months or something. And we finished this wonderful produced product of songs that were all approved by the label and everything, and then they just sat on it and we're like, we don't know if we like it, because it's still the decision to like send it upwards to Sony for release and stuff was still controlled by this one guy, and everybody that worked in that indie label was afraid of this one guy because he held all their livelihoods, so no one's going to challenge him, and we don't have any power to challenge him because we don't have independent management, we don't have independent legal. And so actually, Ben advised me, once he learned what our situation was, he's like, you should get independent legal at least to like reevaluate that. And he introduced us to this amazing lawyer named Seth Lichtenstein, who's worked, he's like been around for 30 years or something. So like the list of who he hasn't worked with is, much shorter than the list of who he is, like everybody. And he helped us, the short version is he helped us get out of our contract. And that process of actually getting out of it took 2 years. So you have to remember this, we got signed in 2015, and now it's 2018 when we're finally released from the contract. So all of our buzz and momentum has been killed at that point. So our plan of showcasing for other labels, like we did, like Ben actually helped us get like other labels to come out. but they were wary because we were still under contract until 2018. So they're like, we're not going to challenge Sony. We're not going to buy you out because we don't think you're valuable enough because your buzz isn't strong enough. Even though so we went from playing to full places on the Sunset Strip to having a hard time drawing people because the buzz was gone, right?
Yeah.
And during that process, members left, and I'm condensing time now, but I went and found new people to play with after we got out of the contract, and struggled finding the right lineup, and then thought that I did. We did some light touring, and then I had a bunch of shows lined up, and then the pandemic hit, and they all left understandably for one reason or another. And for the first time, I was forced to not do anything, right? And actually that stall in momentum was a blessing in disguise. Not the pandemic, that's a horrible, terrible situation, but me being forced to sit with, all right, you've had all this experience. Who is it that you want to be as an artist? What is it that you want to accomplish? And actually answer those questions. And so, it was the first time I started just writing by myself as opposed to collaborating, because my longtime friend and collaborator decided to quit. And so that's when my musical style started changing. It's related, but it's not just straight rock bro, alternative rock. It's more expansive and drawing from my own personal influences as opposed to everybody's influences sort of crashing together.
Yeah.
And that's when I started a TikTok because I was bored. and the amazing thing about TikTok, every social media company sucks, right? But TikTok currently doesn't gate your reach. Everybody has a relatively equal chance of going viral. I say relatively because the algorithm is still racist. It prioritizes white faces. There's certain keywords that you can't say. It's still hard for musicians because it doesn't understand music. If you just play music, it's always scanning for speech. So it might not know how to recommend you to other people. But I started with music recording and sort of industry tip kind of stuff, and then throwing my music in there too. And then I started making the several series that I make now, and it took off and gained me a lot of reach. And now people are finding out about my music, ironically, because of me talking about music related or adjacent things.
Yeah.
And that's really cool, and I'm really thankful for it. But I'm not satisfied because I want the primary focus to be my music, and so I'm still working on it. But I'm thankful to be able to reach an audience, because when whether it's Spotify or Apple Music or Instagram or Facebook, well, Facebook's like a boomer graveyard right now, but Twitter or whatever, all those companies gate your reach. So even if you have whatever it is, 10, actually a good example is The Rock. The Rock has 1 point something million followers, right? And I tuned into one of his live streams one time, and he only had 50K people watching him. Now, 50,000 people watching you is amazing, but out of a million, that's not even 1%. And what Instagram does is it gates your reach, so that even if there are people that say, yes, I'm following you because I want to get updates on you, it's factoring in all this stuff, like when's the last time you engaged with one of their posts? What type of engagements do you do? And so it's really frustrating for artists of any medium because they don't push content out. They gate it in the hopes that then you pay to sponsor the posts.
I was just going to say it. That is so frustrating.
But the problem then, for a while that worked, but the problem then is sponsoring posts, I swear, puts you in front of their bots that they own, because I've done plenty of social media marketing, and you'll get you sponsored this post for $3 and 2,000 people viewed it, but there's no engagement and no comments. And so it's so you ran me past bots that you own. But then if I use bots, you'll ban my account. So I've almost stopped posting on Instagram and Twitter because it's what's the fucking point? Nobody sees it. And on TikTok, I'm actually able to reach an audience. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. I have my own legal, I have my own management, but I'm not currently signed, and I'm just putting out music like as I want to. Well, I mean, my management handles like a release plan and stuff, but like as I want to put it out, and they're really great people that I'm working with because they believe in me as an artist and a product, as opposed to just a power trip.
Yeah, yeah. So, do you feel like you've any anger towards the music industry after your experiences?
Um, not personally. I have anger that the music industry is a monopoly, a gated monopoly, like almost every industry now, because it's totally corrupted by capitalism. So, like, if you sign to a label now, unless you and I go start a label right now, there is no such thing as an independent label. They're all, if you look at who owns everything, it all goes back to the four major record company, or maybe it's just three now. It might have just been three now, but there's very small number that actually own everything. It's kind of like the beverage industry. So when I mean, maybe this is slightly different, I don't know, but in America, when you walk into like a supermarket and there's all the beer in the beer section, and there's this illusion of choice because there's all these different brands, but all those brands trace back to one of two companies. And on the one hand, that's a good deal for an independent, or it feels like a good deal for if you're an independent beer manufacturer because you get access to this distribution network. But you have to give up some of the ownership of your company and control. And that means that you're also, every sale of your beer is also contributing to this monopoly that's conglomerate. And soon I'm sure it'll be one beer company, And what that creates is a system where, like, if you're just an independent beer maker and you want to get your beer into a large chain here is called Vaughn's. If you want to get it into Vaughn's, there's no way, you can't pay anybody. Like, there's no way to get in unless you're in the club, right? And that's kind of how the music industry is. Like, you can be a very successful independent artist up to a point, but to then get access to the best festivals, all the late night shows, radio, although radio's pretty much dead, but the best, like, playlisting, like all the things that you would associate with a successful musician, you have to be, well, there's two ways. You have to either be under contract with one of the big labels, or you have to be so unbelievably rich that you can buy your way in and buy those same services. And that's totally prohibitive to any independent artist. And on top of that, we're using numbers as a metric for an artist's worth. So there's, one thing I do is I try to seek out independent artists and put them on a playlist on my Spotify. And one of the things I say when I post those videos is, like, I don't care, like, what your actual listening numbers are. Like, I don't care if your song has just 91 plays or whatever. Like, if it's a good song, I'm going to put it on there because I know that Spotify does not push independent artists. If you look at the top Spotify playlists, it's all major label artists that are on there. That's no coincidence. The majors own like 40% of Spotify or something. So of course they're prioritizing them. So that's what I'm mad at, is the system needs to change. And it's the same thing with the movie industry or the dance industry, or I'm sure, I don't know much about the art world, but I'm sure. And that's before you even get into stuff like who gets the opportunities, before you get into race and gender and sexuality and sexism and misogyny and like all that, that's before you get there. So like, if I'm mad at anything, it's that system, and I want to change it. So the thing that I try and do is any little bit of success I get, like, bring other people with me, other artists that I believe in. And I think that if every artist started doing that, not that there's no other artists that do that, but if every artist does that, you'll actually start to see a shift in the music industry.
Feels like it's stacked so much against you. I often think to myself, could you imagine, like, the greats from years ago, the Elvises, the Beatles, guys like that. Can you imagine the guys that were actually like 1,000 times better than them, but things just didn't fall into place?
Well, Yeah, I mean Elvis is a great example because talk about the original musical appropriator, right? Like he's a talented performer who barely wrote any of his own music, and he his affectation is all based on Black American soul and rock and roll, down to like actually stealing songs. I did a TikTok on that actually, and the real person. So I'm forgetting the name of the song at the moment, but one of his most famous songs.
Don't Be Cruel, I think, was it?
It might be. I don't remember without having it in front of me. But one of his most famous songs, the writer, who was a black man, was not credited on that for years and years and years. And he did get a credit, but he never received any royalties from it because he signed a shitty deal because like the music industry was even more segregated then than it is now. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, late Elvis is the original boy band. Like he's a label creation. Does that mean that Elvis wasn't a great performer? Like, no, but he's not someone that acknowledged any of that, and his legacy doesn't reflect that. He's called the king of rock and roll, right? And the actual inventor of rock and roll is, I think it's Big Mama Thornton, is like a queer black woman who is the first person really credited with loud rock guitar performance, and like where's her music industry Hall of Fame awards and stuff? No, it's Elvis is the king. So the industry has always been fucked by these other societal factors, white supremacy and systemic racism and capitalism and like all that stuff. But there used to be more, even though it sucked, more of a career path than now, because at least you could get in a van and go tour, right?
Yeah.
And now that is so cost prohibitive. And let's pretend we weren't in a pandemic for a second. Like gas, to be able to make money as an independent artist, you have to draw a massive amount of people just to be able to even break even touring. And that's changed really, like even in the last 6 years or so. Like even 6 years ago, you might be able to still do it a little bit, and now it's just not. Again, unless you're independently wealthy or you have very affluent parents or something, and can do a vanity tour or buy your way into these clubs.
Yeah.
I mean, we can talk about this all day because that even the club system, like they're owned. Again, it goes back to there's Live Nation is one of them, and I forget the other one, but it's a monopoly. So unless you're plugged into a booking agent who has access to that system, you're going to be playing a lot of shitty bars, and those shitty bars have a high overhead, which means that you have to draw a lot of people,
larger crowd,
and that means if you're going to do a tour, you need a huge marketing budget to promote you to people who don't know about you before you get there, so they show up for you. So unless you have the money to do all these things, and either the expertise to do it yourself or the money to hire people who know how to do it, you're stuck. So I think the only viable career path for independent artists right now is online, and create a demand for a live show by becoming as successful as you can online. That's what I'm going after anyway.
Your series on TikTok, then, it's hugely fascinating. What made you, start doing that series and seeking out these artists that portray the myth that they came from poverty, or they didn't have much starting off?
I think it's not the first one I did, but the one that irritated me and I started looking into it was Ed Sheeran, because his whole story is that, he went from busking on the street and being, homeless to superstar musician. And while those events did occur technically, he did sleep in his car a couple nights and he did do busking. That is not how he became who he is. So this, I think, is a combination of the experience that I've gone through of, what you need to do is work really, really, really hard. And then the gatekeepers will notice you. And they did. I got signed. And then all your problems are over. And it's like, no, that gets you from negative to zero. Like getting signed is like zero. And then there's all these other problems that we've been talking about, right? And if you come from wealth, you have not only the money to buy your way around those problems, but usually direct personal connections with people that control the industry that you can just be like, like if Mick Jagger's like, hey, my kid wants to do music, he just calls up the president of whatever, and then they get to go do that,
Yeah.
And it's tricky because it doesn't mean then that kid doesn't work hard or isn't good, whoever they are or whatever. It's just that they're starting like one step from the end of the finish line, and everybody else is at different points all the way along back. I also learned a whole bunch about it from a whole host of BIPOC activists and content creators, which I linked to sort of an ongoing list of people that I'm learning from on my website. If you go to officialvattica.com/links, there's links there for like who I'm learning from, also anti-racism resources for white folks like me, and then also white music and all that stuff. But I think it's important, especially since I'm a queer non-binary person, but I live in a mask-presenting body, and so I, as far as the algorithms are concerned, like I'm a cis white dude, right? And so my voice gets prioritized over a lot of people just before I even speak, just based on the way that I look and our society and the algorithms. And so I think it's really important for me to point out that I'm certainly not the first person that has been talking about this. And I'm sometimes not even the first person to be doing stories on the people that I do. So I don't want to be taking credit for like, oh, you're sparking a revolution by challenging the narrative. It's like, no, it's a whole community of people that are doing that, and I am one of them. But there are people that are much more knowledgeable than me. That's why I stick to music. People ask me on TikTok, do this actor, or what about do one on Jeff Bezos, or what about this person in real estate or whatever. And it's like I don't want to step outside of my lane, and music is the only thing that I have direct lived experience with. And even then, I tend not to focus on Black and Indigenous and people of color. I'm not dismantling a lot of rappers like Jay-Z or something, because that's a whole separate component, being Black in America, that I'm not qualified to speak about. I'm only qualified to learn about, right? So that if somebody wants to start doing that series, please do it. But so whenever I'm asked about my TikTok videos, I always like to point that out, because I don't want to take any credit for there's a phrase I say in the videos that none of us are self-made, all of us are community-made. I didn't come up with that. I learned that from Indigenous activists specifically, and that was revolutionary for me, because I, like everyone else, grew up with toxic individualism as the work hard, and as long as you work hard, you will be rewarded for your hard work, right? The American dream, and that's just not. It's propaganda. It's not true. So, but I've only known that, and known in my bones, known that for the last 5 or 6 years or so. And my partner also is really she's so cool. She's an amazing activist and organizer and a dancer and a choreographer and artist and mover and creator, and she's the founder of the artist collective that I'm a part of called Good Troublemakers. Oh. And she taught and continues to teach me every day a whole bunch of stuff that I would never be exposed to had I not met her, because of the insulation that white privilege provides. So all that is to say, if someone is watching me and it's the first time they've ever come to activism, welcome. Now go learn from the people that I'm learning from. I'm not an authority. I'm just making. I'm just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, you're helping their message get out to more.
Yeah.
That's one of the first things I noticed about you actually when I came across you, is your values, and that you use your platform for good and what matters to you. You believe in something. It's not just false, or it's not like some pop star you look at and I just want to get rich and famous. You actually care about what matters to you, you know?
Yeah, I do, and it's a double-edged sword because like the first time I got a video that got 1 million hits, like it was really weird for me because I tried so long to get those kind of numbers on music, right?
Mm.
And here I am, I've got this number now, but it's on like me talking about somebody else. And so on the one hand, it's an incredible privilege to like it's just such a mind fuck for me that like even let's say even half those views were repeat viewing, so 500,000 people. I can't, my mind can't imagine that number, like that many people saw my face or heard my voice. Like it's weird.
Yeah.
And some of them say stuff like oh you're just bitter or oh you're jealous of these people's success. And no, like I'm not. I'm neither of those things. Like I'm trying to point out for my fellow independent artists that the enormous pressure that we put on ourselves, because I've done it my whole life, of I know that I'm good, right? Because of this, and this. And there is a target audience for everything. My favorite example, there's 3 Human Centipede movies, possibly the grossest movies ever made. They made 3 of them. That means people love it. Somebody does, right? So there's a target audience for you. So even if a person doesn't like my music specifically, like that's fine. There are people that do. It's all about finding your target audience. And so how come it took me so long? I was 32 or 33 when I got signed. Like I previously I had been like, if I don't get signed by the time I'm 30, I've got to hang it up. I've got to get like a civilian job. And I just kept going, actually based on a quote that Harrison Ford, the actor, said, where he said, I saw a lot of people way more talented than me quit. And one of the reasons that I got the opportunities that I did is I just hung around. And also, I don't think that I could, because music is such a fundamental part of who I am. I don't know what I'd be if I couldn't do it. But I was like, why am I not getting the opportunities that these people, every 1 to 3 years, there's the new teen pop idol, like, and this person always comes out of nowhere and like, they just uploaded something onto SoundCloud and it blew up and then they got all the offers and wow, they're amazing. And it's like, no, what happened is one of these things. They come from wealth, or they were planted there by the industry, or if you look up their real name, they're the son of or the daughter or whatever of a celebrity. And at the same time, that doesn't take away from that person's talent, right? Like Billie Eilish definitely has a vibe. Like she's got a cool voice, like, and she's like a talented performer. And she comes from a show business, like entertainment family. And so she had it easier than someone who doesn't come from that. I inhabit a white cis body. I mean, I'm not cis, but I inhabit a cis passing body. I grew up in a upper middle class family, so that means they owned property. Like only one of my parents worked for the first 12 years because my dad had a job as a teacher, and at the time that paid enough for them to be able to, we had a garage and they were able to buy me a guitar and like that kind of stuff. Like I'm on a different point in the ladder of privilege, but everybody has something that somebody else doesn't have. Right now in LA, there's a huge, there has been for a while, but an ever-growing unhoused population. And people, I feel like especially in America, we're obsessed with this idea of like the rags to riches story. Like they went from being homeless to becoming a multinational superstar. And so if they can do it, you can too. And it's like, well, oftentimes, no, that's a lie. But even if they did, that means they didn't do that by themselves. There was a series of people that helped them. People that helped me, or my father was a musician, so I started learning really early. The teachers that I had, all the people that I've ever played with, all the bands that I've ever played with, anyone that's ever bought a copy of my music or listened to my music, anyone that's ever watched one of my videos, all those people are helping me advance forwards. I didn't just generate that out of nothingness, right? And so going back to, I think that makes people uncomfortable because it feels like you have less control, because we're all told from birth, like work hard and your hard work will pay off. and you can work as hard as you want in a lot of industries, and that'll get you to the wall, and then you can't get past the wall without somebody letting you in. Very different than like, and that's before you get into like jobs that don't have a career track. Like a lawyer has a career track, whereas a musician, like everybody's story is completely different because there is no one way to do it. It's always this combination. So yeah, I absolutely have things that I believe in, and I want to help lift up my fellow artists, not just myself, you know.
Yeah. That's what's important as well, you know. And I hate the way society almost is made to hold you down. You know, they build you up with these hopes and dreams, but then there's like practically no chance of you achieving them. But also there's a band that is the perfect example of what you're talking about in Ireland right now. I don't know if you've heard of them. Have you ever heard of Inhaler?
No, but I'll look them up now.
Yeah. So last year they exploded onto the scene. They were being played on all the top radio stations. Seemed to have come from nowhere. The lead singer's father is Bono from U2. Yeah.
Well, I mean, awesome. Thanks. You just gave me an idea for another video, so I'm going to do that for sure. But yeah, well, it was probably hard, right? It's probably hard for him to, or actually, I don't know how he identifies, but how that person identifies. But they, just because Bono's your father doesn't mean you're going to get industry connections, right? I'm being completely sarcastic. Yes, of course they are. Your father's Bono. Like,
yeah.
There is the one I just uploaded last night is about this band that I'd never heard of called the Slim Kings. And when you look at them, they're an indie band. Like they barely have like any following online, and they play small shows. But then you look at their credits, they've got like all these major placements in like major Netflix and Showtime shows and stuff. And they've performed with all these legendary bands like ZZ Top and Los Lonely Boys, and their drummer. They work with a professional drummer that's been around forever and has played with Paul McCartney and like John Mayer, like all these credits. And they have an impressive list of accolades, and you're like, how do I not know who they are, and how did they achieve all this? Oh, well, their lead singer last name is Sackler, and Sackler is one of the 5 billionaire families in the United States. So he decided that, you know, he wanted to do like the indie musician route. He wasn't going after fame specifically, and why would he need to? You know, he's set. But it just means that he was able to, at the very least, focus on music full time. Let's say he accomplished every one of those things by himself. He still was able to have the time to do that because he didn't have to work. He didn't have to worry about bills and rent and tour expenses and like all that stuff. But it's the reason I start to get mad is it's not for faulting somebody for coming from money. You can't help where you're born, but it's not presented that way. Like when you read interviews about him, it's like, oh, the one that made me mad was called "A Man and His Music," and he, he's just a band coming out of the New York scene, and they've been getting some notoriety lately. And yeah, I do allude to sort of like my father was this famous psychiatrist, and my uncle's in the recording industry or whatever. But like, gosh, we've been able to have all these experiences, and like, yeah, they're. His uncle, his father was a famous psychiatrist who helped expand and found Purdue Pharma, which is the maker of OxyContin, and just like money forever, right? So I think one of the important things, if you're Bono's kid, is to always bring that up in interviews, because I just want to acknowledge that, one of the reasons I'm here talking to you today, Stephen Colbert, or whatever, is because of who my father is. And of course, I want to distance myself from my father and try to achieve things on my own. But it's important to note that there's no guarantee that I would be here. And that person has a large voice, so they could talk about these things that we've been talking about today and raise the issue to that, and bring other bands with them and all that. So, I think that artists have a responsibility to bring people along with them at whatever level that they can. And I don't think a lot of artists or at least a lot of the major artists like to hear that or forget that along the way somehow.
Yeah, yeah. It's hard to even think of a solution that would make it fairer for the normal Joe Soaps coming up the ladder as well. Like, you can't, if you were to totally flip it and say, right, if you come from a privileged background, you can't have the same opportunities, because then you're limiting that side as well, you know? It's hard to come up with a solution almost.
Yeah, I mean, and I certainly don't have if we just did this, everything would be fine. I think because it's a multifaceted problem, right? And they're also linked to all these societal factors like we've been talking about, the most obvious of which is monopolies. And we already know, like, back when there were more independent record companies, they could still be huge, but there were still more options. They were competing with each other to have the best artists,
Yeah.
And so A&R people were actually going out to shows looking for artists, and they actually had people who were skilled at identifying talent and betting on talent, as opposed to, okay, well, this artist has 10 million followers, but this artist has 20 million, so the 20 million one's got to be better. It's like, no, those are just numbers. Like,
yeah,
it has nothing to do with like creativity, originality, longevity, what the artist is trying to say. It's not about content. You see that reflected in the movie industry too. It's like they're only making stuff now that either is an established property that sold before, so they know it'll sell again, or something that is so perfectly stacked with whoever's currently trending the most that it's like a sure investment. And that's because, I mean, there's very few. Actually, Disney owns like half of the movie studios, right? And then I forget who the other one, Warner, but there used to be a lot more independent studios who would take chances on films, or these 5 films are going to be our big money making films this year, and those give us the money to try this movie or try out this movie and see if that works. So that could be a step, returning, any kind of. I think we're supposed to have, what is it called? It's an antitrust, anti-monopoly laws, but nobody enforces them. So that could be one thing. And also the listener, I think, can do a lot by trying to search out stuff that you like beyond what the algorithm's presenting you. Because the algorithm, I don't know if you've ever done this, but you go to whatever band and then go to similar artists. And then at a certain point, it just stops, and there's no more similar artists. Like, bullshit. There's infinite similar artists to whoever you're trying to listen to. But these are the ones that Spotify is showing you, based on, again, like these artificial metrics of like, well, do they have over? Like, for example, on Spotify, if a song has under 1,000 plays, it just shows under 1,000. Like it doesn't. There's a graphic that says like less than 1,000. It doesn't say 12. It doesn't say 999. It's just less than. So it's saying the message that this song is completely worthless until it reaches at least 1,000 plays. But then once you reach 1,000 plays, well, it only has 1,000 plays. This song has 200,000 plays. That's got to be better.
Yeah.
And as long as we're determining everything only by those kind of data points, not that those data points don't have knowledge, or have some importance. It's just, if it's only down to like a spreadsheet, that's not how art works. You can't quantify what one song is to one person based on how somebody else reacted to that song. Everybody, something like music is an incredibly personal experience, and the way that I interpret song X is not going to be the same way that you interpret song X. It's not going to be the same way that somebody else, so listeners actually have viewers, consumers have the power to actually determine what's good, as long as they continue to search for what's good and not just accept what's fed to them. Because what's being fed to you has an agenda behind it, specifically.
Yeah. How do you feel about the whole TikTok thing then, of like a clip of music will get a load of views on a video, and then the next week it's the biggest song out there, and it might be not the greatest song you've ever heard, but it overshadows all genuinely good music.
I think that there's the illusion of scarcity, right? There's always room for another good song, another good movie, another good painting, another good dance performance, like whatever. So if a clip of a song blows up, whether that's organically and then because of those numbers, a label comes calling and plugs it into the system, or it was a label or a marketing firm that made it blow up or whatever. I don't think that if we're talking about TikTok specifically, that doesn't overshadow another artist. It just means that's one of the ways to get your music out there right now, and it's totally possible to have a song blow up that way for a completely independent artist. It's absolutely possible. The odds are not great, but at least there's odds, as opposed to if you upload them to Instagram, there's no way unless you have a huge budget.
Yeah.
So right now, even though TikTok is like, a Chinese government spyware app, basically, like it's still, it's one of the bright spots in the industry because like, I've been doing this like a long time, since I was 14. And that's the first time that I've had the validation of having my music being put in front of an audience on a more massive level, and then just having people respond to it. And some people like it and some people don't, but the people that don't like it don't tend to follow me, and that's fine. Like, that's how it's supposed to work. But then I do find the people that do like me, and then we found each other, and I can make music for them and they can listen to it. And because it's a social media app, we can engage with each other, and like it's a community. And I think it's funny that TikTok is described as like a revolutionary. Who could have predicted? And it's like everyone could have predicted. Like, all artists want to do is for people to consume their art, and all consumers want is more content. So stop creating barriers in between those things.
Yeah. Exactly. I could literally sit here all day talking to you about this, but I just realized you probably have other things to do today, so we better move on to the last couple of questions.
Sure.
So I usually ask these to get a taste of your music tastes.
Okay.
If you could see any performer from history in concert for one night only, who would it be?
Oh my God. I've been asked this question before, and it's impossible because there's so many great ones throughout history. Well, I was fortunate that I got to see B.B. King before he passed away, and that was amazing. Yeah, I was young, but I still got to see him. He like, he was like, I don't know, 80 or something. They wheeled him out on a chair, and you thought like, oh God, they're just making money off this guy. And then like, he just like destroyed, like he was incredible.
He
like,
still has it. Oh,
better even. Yeah. Like just amazing. And sitting down too, and it's just like, I personally really would have loved to have been able to see Queen. I find Freddie Mercury so inspiring. And that's the person that jumped into my mind at the moment. He's on my mind today because I was listening to Queen earlier, but so that's as close as I can't. There's too many. I can't answer with just a one.
It'd have to be a big festival.
Yeah, because like I never got to see Jimi Hendrix. I never got to see James Brown. I never got to see, like we talked earlier, Big Mama Thornton. This before I was even alive. Like I never. So I never got to see Prince. Oh my God, Prince! Like never had the opportunity. So there would just be a revolving door of people.
Be one hell of a weekend.
Yeah.
The next one. So if you could spend 24 hours in a room with any artist or performer from history, who would it be?
It's the same question. It's just even more personal. I'm not just watching them. I'm with them now. This time I am going to say Prince because as someone who is writing music by myself and playing all the instruments, whether organically or digitally, I mean, I certainly don't compare to Prince, and I would love to be able to soak up, a writing session with him or something, just be around that energy, because he was an endless. Talk about a vessel for creativity.
Yeah,
I heard this story where he used to, after playing a full 2-hour show, he would invite the people backstage back to his place, where he would then continue to just perform new ideas on the piano forever. For so long, he'd wear people out. Like people would like pass out or like want to leave, but you can't leave because Prince is playing, right? But
Yeah.
like, so to be around that creative energy and such like a truly revolutionary icon would be such a privilege.
Yeah. He's one of them ones. It really is a pity that he was taken so young.
Yeah. I mean, I do that. When I was experimenting what videos to try and do on TikTok, one I did was here's like 20 seconds of a John Mayer guitar solo, or sorry, Adam Levine from Maroon 5, and 20 seconds of Prince. And my point was Prince is objectively better because he has this intrinsic quality called soul and feel, right? And Adam from Maroon 5 can play the hell out of the guitar, but it's very technical and I don't feel anything when he plays.
Yeah.
And that sparked, it brought an avalanche of guitar bros yelling at me, which I was not prepared for, because they were intellectualizing music. They're focusing on like technique. Well, Prince technically should have been doing this. And it's like, when Prince plays, I feel something. When Maroon 5 plays, I feel nothing. For me, and that's my subjective opinion, right? Somebody else could have a completely different opinion. But for me, that's what I want from art, is I want it to make me feel. And Maroon 5 is a very calculated product that is very well done. It's amazingly well executed, and they have a great writing team and all of that stuff. Catchy. But I don't feel anything when I listen to it. And all Prince has to do is say "Dearly Beloved" in that beginning of that song, and you're just like, like you're in.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. But then that's it about music as well. As most basic form, it has to make you feel something. You know?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. There's people that disagree with us throughout history. Like, I don't know. Do you know who John Cage is?
No.
He was revolutionary in the 60s because his performance was the art of non-performance. So his most famous piece is he walks out onto stage to a grand piano and he sits down and does nothing for 4 minutes and 33 seconds. And his point was everything is performance and everything is music, because and this is a piece, because while I sit down here, my breathing is happening, the audience is shifting like uncomfortably or coughing, there's the sound of the auditorium, there's air, there's everything that's happening in this room can never be replicated this exact way again. And now that I've left, and that was a performance. And while intellectually I agree with him, I'd say that that's not music, that's art.
Exactly.
But that doesn't make me feel anything. And when I had the privilege of going to graduate school because I wanted to get a degree so that I could teach, and now I'm horribly in debt. But that school that I went to loved him, and like it was all about like that, like intellectualizing music. And that was at the same time that I was like signing a deal and stuff, and I felt like doing the real music in the industry. So I couldn't have felt more isolated in the place like that is purporting to be about music, because they're intellectualized. No one was concerned with feel there.
Yeah.
Well, except the jazz department. The jazz class was great. That's all about feel, but everything else was just like looking down the nose at like anything pop or singer-songwriter or rock or whatever. And it was all like, no, we've got to make people think. And it's like, well, then you're artists. You're doing art or performance art. That's all fine, but that's not music, damn it. And so yeah, but I agree with you. The music's supposed to move your soul and your feet.
Exactly. The last one. So if there was a song that could appear on the soundtrack to your life, what would it be?
I feel like songs do all the time, because I'm listening to music constantly. Like every song that I fall in love with becomes part of the soundtrack to my life. I mean, if you're interested in sort of what I'm listening to currently, it's on my Spotify profile. You just go to search Vattica, and I have a couple different playlists on there, that stuff that I'm listening to. But so there's definitely no one song. Although the song that comes to me in this moment is actually, it's called Adagio for Strings by Samuel Barber, because it's one of the few. usually not a big classical music fan, but it's one of the few pieces that perfectly captures the sort of poignant agony of striving, of trying to a yearning, and whether that's for accomplishment or love or whatever. There's this part of the piece where it crescendos so long that it's almost intolerable, and finally it decays. It's a violin piece, and it's the first piece of classical music I ever heard my whole life that moved me to tears. So that would definitely be in there for sure.
Yeah, it'd have to if it got that sort of reaction from you, I suppose.
Yeah,
you made me think of something as well, though. About back on the topic of music, what I love about music is a song could come on the radio, and it'll instantly bring the memories of when I heard it first. And I always say, some of my friends think I'm slightly odd for it, but I could almost tell you what the smells I was smelling were the first time I heard it. I absolutely love that about music. You know, it makes it so much more than music, and it makes it so much a personal experience.
Absolutely. I forget the exact terminology. There's science behind that. Music and memory are stored and processed in different parts of the brain, and they actually survive often diseases like Alzheimer's. Back when I was teaching guitar lessons, I had a student who was like 76 or something, and he used to be like a really accomplished guitar player, but he had Alzheimer's, and so he'd come in, and each time he'd come in for beginning guitar lessons, and then over the course of the lesson, he'd remember that he could play the guitar, and suddenly he'd become this virtuoso, and he'd light up again, like as a person, even though he wasn't good communicating verbally really anymore. And then he'd leave, and then he'd come back, and he'd have forgotten it all again, and the process would happen. So it was like, in one way, it was the same lesson over and over and over. But you're absolutely right that music can transport you back to a time and place, or forward to a time and place, and you can recall the sense memories and everything. It's incredibly powerful. I think it's also because it goes beyond. It is a universal language in a lot of ways. Like, it goes beyond thought and speech and cuts right to emotion and feeling if done correctly. Just the same way a really beautiful shot in a film or a painting, or an expression that a dancer does with their body, or can speak to something that, takes a paragraph of words to describe.
Yeah,
or hint
exactly. At. Yeah. Geez, we got very deep this afternoon, didn't we?
You're talking about my favorite thing in the world. Yeah, I'm here all day.
Yeah. So, what's on the cards for the future for Vattica?
Well, that's I'm definitely going to keep making stuff on TikTok. I'm going to keep releasing music as far as music videos. As far as anything else, who knows? Because we're really in this really uncertain time of this once in a century pandemic, and I'm currently dealing with the collapse of the American empire and the rise of fascism, and so like everything's uncertain, right down to the quality of the air that we breathe. So I don't know. I have no idea what's going to happen, but I know that I'm going to be creating art through all of it. And so either I'll become really successful at that or I won't, but in terms of like prominence or whatever, but I already feel accomplished in that I'm the stuff that I'm creating now is me, as opposed to a filtered version of me. And so I'm kind of at peace with that.
Chasing second chances, searching for a spark, looking for the answers in the dark. I can't even tell if you can hear me. I just want someone to
you love music, music news, and guest interviews with artists from all around the world across many different genres? My name's Nolan, and I love music. In fact, I love music so much I created a podcast entirely dedicated to it called Every Podcast I Love Is Dead. Every week is a brand new episode where I interview musicians, artists, podcasters, radio hosts, and so much more. New episodes are available every Thursday on all your favorite podcast streaming platforms, and you can check us out on social media and at everypodcastiloveisdead.com. Hope you can join me.
Hey guys, I really hope you enjoyed this show. If you did, rate and review us on iTunes. Really helps the show grow. You can find us on social media at Concerts That Made Us Podcast, and be sure to check out our website at www.concertsthatmadeus.com. And if you'd like to support the show, you can do so by signing up at patreon.com/Concerts That Made Us. We've got 3 tiers available. If that's something you're interested in, you'll get access to a private Discord, exclusive uncut video versions of the podcast, early access to ad-free versions of the episodes, and much, much more. So, until next time, keep rocking.
Hey, what are you guys still doing here? The show is over. It's over. You can go home. Go on. We'll see you next time. We'll be here. Bye.